Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. In today's class video, we have an excellent presentation by our esteemed faculty members, Donna Young and Vanessa Ludberg, on Sect. One of the advantages of studying with KeplerCollege is that you'll have instant feedback to your questions in live sessions, as well as feedback on your assignments. Our 101 course runs 3 times a year in our winter, spring and fall semesters. So if you'd like to learn more, please see the link below this video in the description. And on behalf of KeplerCollege, I wish to thank all of you who continue to support our channel. We have just reached the 10,000 subscriber mark, so thank you for joining our growing community, and we look forward to producing great content as we move forward. And without further ado, let's get into the video.
So it's an overview of sect and of essential dignity. Sect, of course, is the division of the chart between day and night. So whether you really, what it boils down to is, were you born in the daytime or were you born in the nighttime? A diurnal chart is the chart of someone who was born in the daytime, and a nocturnal chart is the chart of someone who was born in the nighttime. And this is one of the things that was kind of lost in, I don't know, in modern astrology, we'll say it got lost in translation along the way, because it was always in Greek astrology one of the really important things that they used to interpret charts, and it played a role in a whole bunch of things. And somewhere along the way, it got lost in translation. And by that, I mean that quite literally, as they were translating and retranslating the astrological texts, somehow along the line, sect just kind of got dropped out. And so when they were doing the Project Hindsight translation work of the old text, this was one of the things that they found that they recognized had not transferred over into Western modern astrology. And they wanted to bring that back into the forefront of everybody's minds. Not all of the things that they found when they were doing those translations did they find to be, important enough that we must share it with the world. It doesn't mean that it's not important, but the information that they had found up to that point wasn't really telling them that it was something that we needed to really, really emphasize. But sect was one thing that they really felt was important. And I think the more I look at the charts through that lens, the more I agree with that statement. And so, how do we determine sect? Really, it's just whether the sun is above the horizon. You guys all know that. And when we're looking at the charts, this is the southern part of the chart. Above the horizon is the top part of the chart, and the nighttime is below the horizon. So if the sun is, if you can see the sun, it's daytime. If you can't see the sun, it's nighttime. We understand that principle without having to look at these charts. And what we would say about this is that in a day chart, the sun is our luminary. In a night chart, the moon is our luminary. And we understand that principle just from being outside. In the daytime, we can see the sun. Now, of course, we know that in the nighttime, we can't always see the moon. But that doesn't mean that the moon isn't still our luminary in the nighttime. That's what we would never expect to find the sun in the nighttime, but we do expect to find the moon. So when we're using that in our vocabulary, we are saying that the sun is the sect light or the moon is the sect light. The sun is the sect light in a diurnal chart, and the moon is the sect light in a nocturnal chart. You guys stop me if ever you have a question, please. We don't have to wait till the end or anything. Within these two sects, we would consider these to be like teams. And I was thinking about this when I was looking at these slides. Vanessa does the marvelous job on all of our PowerPoints for the fundamentals classes. And she was choosing she put football players in here. And I like this. We've got Jupiter, Saturn, and the sun on the team of the diurnal sect. And Venus and Mars are on the team of the nocturnal sect with the moon. Mercury can go either way, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But when I was looking at this slide and this sports analogy, I was thinking of it, for me, I used to play basketball. And, they would toss the ball up in the air, and you'd have to, whoever had the longest arm or the best jumper, whoever it would be, would get possession of the ball. And it's kind of like that. So depending on whether you were born in the day or the night, it's like who has possession of the ball. So if we think about the ball as the lights, that's one way to think about it. And so if you're born during the day, this team has possession of the ball and they have got a little bit more strength in the chart. If you're born in the night, this team has possession of the ball and they're the ones that have more strength or less detriment, depending on how you look at it. So each team has got a luminary, a benefic, and a malefic. And we're used to those terms already. The benefics, of course, are Jupiter and Venus. And when we're talking about the vocabulary that we're used to hearing, we hear often, well, Jupiter is the greater benefic and Saturn is the greater malefic and the Venus and Mars are the lessers. But in reality, if we break it into sect, Jupiter is the greater benefic in a day chart and Venus is the greater benefic in a night chart. So that's a little bit of a twist in terms of how we think about things, but it's an important thing to consider and fine tune when you're doing your chart interpretations. And so, you know, they did end up putting the heavier, the Jupiter and the Saturn, the greater benefic and the malefic with the sun, and the lesser malefic and benefic with the moon. The malefics themselves, they are considered, they're still malefics. If you're looking at a day chart, Saturn is still a malefic. But we would consider, if we think about those planets as ones that have the potential to do harm, we would say that they do less harm if they're in the chart of the sect in favor. So that shifts the order of things in terms of which one is actually greater and which one is lesser. So we can see that here in the diurnal chart, we would say that these planets are more constructive, or in the case of the malefic, less destructive. And the same is also true when we're looking at the nocturnal chart. These planets that are part of that team are more constructive or less destructive. And this is a little chart that will put it into perspective for you. So in a day chart, Jupiter is the most fortunate, and then Venus, it's still a benefic. Then Saturn is the lesser malefic, and then Mars is the greater malefic. And then we just flip the order in a night chart. So Venus becomes the most fortunate or the greater benefic. Jupiter is the lesser benefic, and Mars is, this is more the order, you know, that we're used to seeing in terms of the malefics here. So Mars is the lesser malefic and Mars is the greater malefic. Does that make sense to everybody? Nods, okay. So we talk about these places where the planets are going to be having their greater ability to express themselves. So the planets, if we're talking about the day team and the night team, the planets that are part of the diurnal team, Jupiter and Saturn, we know that the sun wants to be above the horizon, and Jupiter and Saturn want to be above the horizon with the sun. So even, yeah, I'll just leave that there. And then the moon wants to be below the horizon during the daytime, right? So if it's daytime here, you know, we want the moon to be on the other side of the world in the nighttime. And so the moon in a daytime chart is going to be happier below the horizon. And the sectmates always want to be with their captain, as it were, follow their captain. And so, yeah, they want to be in the same area where their light is most naturally expressed. So this one is pretty easy. We can see here that here the sun is above the horizon, it's daytime. These planets are what we would say in diurnal condition. They're all above the horizon. If it's nighttime, Then the sun is below the horizon, and Jupiter and Saturn also want to be below the horizon with their captain. So they're still considered to be in diurnal condition when they are below the horizon in a nighttime chart.
And I sometimes think of that as if if the sun is on the nighttime side of the chart, it's day somewhere. And so they're still in the day with their captain, but it's somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the team bus. If they're on the team bus, if they're not on the bus, they got left behind. Now, in a nighttime chart, the same thing applies. But of course, we're not looking at whether the moon is above or below the horizon to determine nocturnal. We're still looking as to whether the sun is above the horizon or below the horizon to determine whether it's nighttime. And so we would just look at that. Where is the sun? And is the moon and the moon's team on the opposite side of that? So in this case, even though it's daytime, these nocturnal planets are going to be happier below the horizon. In a nighttime chart, a nocturnal chart, they're going to be happier above the horizon. And so there are these, what we would call sect rejoicing conditions. So, and we've talked about these. Is it in sect? Does it belong to the home team? Is it in a sign related to its sect? So that is the nocturnal signs are, of course, the earth and water signs, and the diurnal signs are the fire and air signs. So that's one of the factors. And this is, regardless of whether it's daytime or nighttime. And is it placed in the chart according to its sect position that we just looked at? So if it meets all three of these conditions, these are medieval terms, it's said to be in haze. And if it meets none of these conditions, and I'm not ever going to pronounce this right, extra conditione. When I first looked at this, I thought it meant excellent condition, but this is what the chart or the little graph that Solar Fire will pull out. So if we look at Muhammad Ali's chart here, we can look at some of these things. And I think it's kind of an interesting one to look at, because we've looked at Muhammad Ali's chart before, and we look at this Mars in Taurus and we think, well, Mars in Taurus doesn't have a great deal of strength. Typically, we don't think about it that way. Stamina, yes, but it's not its favorite place to be in terms of sign. And yet, when we look at it from the condition from sect perspective, we can see that it meets all of these conditions. This is a nighttime chart. The sun is below the horizon. And so we want the Mars and the Venus and the moon to be above the horizon in a nighttime chart. So Mars meets that condition. And it is in a sign, a nocturnal sign in Taurus. So it meets that condition. So it's meeting all three of the conditions that we would call sect rejoicing conditions. Does everybody understand this idea?
I have a question related to it,
Uh-huh.
maybe from an interpretive standpoint. So, if a planet has no essential dignity, and not much going in the accidental, but sect-wise, it's in haze. I know strength is not the same as quality, but how do you put that sentence together?
I mean, it's not a sentence. I would say it's just a consideration. So, I mean, if we look at this Mars as an example, there are some things that we could say. We can say, well, it's in an angular house, but it is in the sign of Taurus. It's in detriment. There's a number of things that we would put together to determine the overall quality. So if you were to prepare yourself a massive spreadsheet of all of these things, just looking at this, if we weren't looking at sect, we would wonder, how is it that Muhammad Ali comes to have this kind of strength and power? Well, there's strength and power to become from Taurus for sure, But otherwise, this Mars doesn't appear to have a great deal going for it. Sim, I don't think I understand your question. Munakara? What is Munakara?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking. It's on AstroGold. If I go to the planetary sect section, it's got in haze, it's got ex-con, but there's another box next to it which is called Munakara.
Oh, you know what? I'm not familiar with that term. I'm going to write it down and find out.
And all my planets which are in haze are also in Munakara.
Interesting.
But I've no clue at all.
Do
I
you
had
know
no
what
clue
that,
what in haze was either until 2 minutes ago. So thank you. But yeah, I don't know.
do you know what that is, Vanessa? Have you ever heard that term?
I have not, but I will find out.
Yeah, no, that's a new one to me. If nothing else, we'll reach out to the people at AstroGold and ask them what that is.
Thank
Because
you.
I've
Thank
never
you.
seen it in any of the texts that I've read, or at least that are sticking into my mind.
I'll do a screenshot and try to post it so that you can.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I
Okay.
have a question before you move on.
Uh-huh.
See, I get confused because yes, it's a night chart, right? But the moon is below the horizon, so the moon should be happy.
Yeah, the moon is happy. So we look at here, we can say, okay, this is a nocturnal chart. If we looked at this thing, so we know that the moon is below the horizon. And so in terms of, happiness, we'll just call this planetary happiness, so we don't get it confused with other terms that we're using. All of these nocturnal planets are pretty happy here because they're nocturnal planet. They are part of the team, right? They've got possession of the ball. So yes, the moon is getting I'm not going to say a point because I don't want to confuse ideas, but let's just say a check mark for the fact that it is the sect light.
But Mars is above the horizon.
But it's still on the team.
How? That's where I get confused. How is it on the team if it's above the horizon?
It's always going to be on the team of the moon. So remembering that what we're looking at, I'm going to draw a line here. What we're looking at when we're deciding what's night and what's day. Where's my line? Oh, I seem to not have a pen here for some reason. Huh, that's weird. Okay, well, the line goes from the ascendant to the descendant. And the only thing that's telling us whether it's day or night is where the sun is.
Okay.
Right? So the sun is below the horizon. We know that it's nighttime.
Yeah.
But because the moon is close to the sun here, we're close to a new moon. The moon isn't going to be visible, right? If the moon was in great condition, the moon would be visible and above the horizon. So the moon is the sect light, even if it's not visible in the sky that night. It's still our sect light.
So, see, that's why I'm still confused. Why is Mars nocturnal then?
Mars is always going to be it's a nocturnal planet. Mars and Venus are both nocturnal.
No, right, but like in this chart, because it's above the horizon.
Let's imagine for a minute that this moon is actually in Taurus.
It's above the horizon, but it's in the dark. Does that make sense? Because it's a night chart, if you went outside, it's dark. And then so Mars is in the night sky in this chart.
Oh, yes. Okay, got it. Sorry. Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
It's hard to like wrap it around because you think it's like the visible part of the chart, but
Yeah.
it's dark
It's
out.
nighttime. It's above. Yes. So it's risen at night. I got it.
That's
it's a
right.
night chart.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
both Venus and Mars in this chart are above the horizon. So they are they get a check mark for that. If we look here, they got a check mark for placement.
I have found Munakara if anybody's interested.
Oh yeah, tell us.
But I can wait if you're explaining something.
Okay. So Mars and Venus both get a check mark for being in the right place.
Mhm.
The placement is above the horizon in this nighttime chart.
Mhm.
And then Mars gets an extra check mark because it's in a nocturnal sign, check mark for Taurus.
Mhm.
Venus and the moon lose that check mark because they're in an air sign, a diurnal sign. So when you're looking at this, I mean, you would look at all of these things. If you're doing an overall evaluation of planetary condition, you would be able to identify, okay, Mars meets all of these conditions. That's really good. You're actually always going to give extra points to the moon because to the sect light, whether it's the sun or the moon. It's like if you're the sect light, you're the captain of the home team, even if you're on the wrong side of the field, right? So they're always going to get bonus points for that. And the sun, you know, we don't even think about that too much because the placement, because the sun is the thing that determines whether it's day or night. So we don't pay as much attention to that in terms of placement. But nonetheless, as a sect light, it gets special consideration. So if we were to just, based on sect, grade these planets, we could easily say here, well, Mars meets all of these sect rejoicing conditions. We know that it's in haze. The sun doesn't meet any, Saturn doesn't meet any, so they are in, you know, pretty poor condition. But then we would say, well, maybe the next strongest planet based on this criteria is Venus, because it's meeting 2 of the sect rejoicing conditions. And then the moon and Mercury would be next in line, and Jupiter, because they each get 1 check mark, as it were. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So Mercury is the one, we identified it in this chart, but how did we identify it? So Mercury will go with the team depending on whether it rises before the sun or after the sun. So is it a morning star or an evening star? And, you know, the ancients used to think, before they realized that Mercury was traveling, that we were traveling around the sun, they thought that these were actually 2 different planets, Mercury as a morning star and Mercury as an evening star. So oh, I'm hearing an echo. Oh, that's gone now. So Mercury rises before the sun. And so that means that before the sun rises, if it's not too close to the sun, it should be visible in the morning sky. You know, if you get up early, or if you live in the north like me, if you look out at 9 a.m., you can see Mercury often shining on the horizon. And in the evening, you can also see Mercury shining, you know, setting in the west, only for a short time in both cases, because Mercury travels really close to the sun always. So how do you determine? Well, if it's a morning star, if you can see it in the morning, then it belongs to the day team, because, you know, Mercury is going to be in the sky as the sun is in the sky, even though we can't see it. It's part of the day team. And if it rises after, then it's part of the nocturnal team. So, you know, this idea, if you're not sure, just move the sun, regardless of where the sun is in your chart, move it over to the position of the ascendant, see where the Mercury is, and that will give you your answer as to whether it's nocturnal or diurnal. Chelsea, bonification and maltreatment aren't something that we really are covering in this concept. That would be more planetary conditions. You know, those are more related to aspect and things like that. It's really much more of a traditional astrology term. I mean, these are traditional astrology terms too, but bonification and maltreatment aren't related to essential dignity or sect. Okay, so these are terms. Oriental is if it's rising before the sun, and Occidental if it's rising after the sun. And you might want to remember those terms, because they get used not just in this circumstance, but further on into your studies, you'll hear those words more often. So here are some examples. Here is Mercury in Freddy Mercury's chart. Really, I mean, right on the ascendant in this case. Mercury is about to rise and the sun will follow 9 degrees later. And so the Mercury will rise, will be visible for a period of time in the sky until the sun rises and, you know, is obliterated by its rays. And in Madonna's chart, the opposite, the sun rose first. So when in the light of day, that Mercury is not going to be visible. When the sun sets, then for a short period of time, Mercury will be visible as an evening star. So in this case, the Mercury is of the diurnal sect, and in this case, Mercury is of the nocturnal sect. And so, why are we using this? How are we using this? It's helping to give you some more information about how these planets are going to be playing out in the life of the individual. Is that Saturn truly a malefic, or does it actually, you know, you often hear people say, and I say it a lot, Saturn always rewards hard work. Well, I'm going to say Saturn always rewards hard work in people who were born during the day. And depending, of course, on everything else to do, you know, what sign is the Saturn in, etc. So those are the things that we would think out. I think you will find, if you start to play with this, using that as an example, that Saturn is more supportive in charts of people born during the day, and Mars is the greater malefic. So it's the Mars transits that might cause greater problems than the Saturn transits. And that's something that I'm not going to tell you that that is a rule, but it's something that I want you to consider as you're going through your charts and looking at the people that, you know, look at your own life and look at the things that have happened to you and, you know, see whether you think those are true. Was your Saturn return something that was really traumatic, or was it something that was really positive? Again, it doesn't turn a malefic into a benefic, but it has a less problematic energy to it as you're going through your life. I don't know if you guys have this book yet, but I think that it's required. It's a new required book. If it wasn't in, did you guys have this as a required book on the heavenly spheres?
I think it was the 103 book.
Okay.
Yeah, we did use that.
Okay, good, because it explains it quite well.
So I'm just gonna, do you want to talk about Munakara really quickly?
Yeah.
Just to answer Sim's question. I have found it in Joy Usher's, well, you can't really see it, Joy Usher's Tiny Universes Companion on page 71. And it has to do with grumpy dispositors. So Munakara, or contention, is nearly the reverse of haze and occurs when a diurnal planet is in the domicile of a nocturnal one, and then that dispositor is in the domicile of a diurnal one. So if you have, it's like a grumpy dispositor. So it's getting help from a planet that's kind of mad at it. And it just, so the example they have is if Saturn is in Aries, ruled by Mars in Pisces. So Saturn is ruled by a nocturnal, Saturn is a diurnal planet ruled by Mars, which is a nocturnal planet. It's in Pisces, but the dispositor of Pisces is a diurnal planet.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the question. I learned my thing for the day. I can check off my list.
And apparently it is akin to being in hostile territory.
Interesting. I'll have to do some research into that. Yeah.
We'll put together some slides and distribute accordingly. Might take us a week or so, but we'll add it in.
Yeah,
Good
Vanessa,
question.
sorry to be a pain. Would you mind just repeating that once again?
Yes. So Munakara is when a diurnal planet is in the domicile of a nocturnal one, and the latter, which is the dispositor, is in the domicile of a diurnal one, or the reverse, when a nocturnal planet is in the domicile of a diurnal planet, and then that planet is in the domicile of a nocturnal planet. And the example is Saturn in Aries, ruled by Mars in Pisces. And so Pisces is ruled by a diurnal planet. So the dispositor of Saturn is ruled by a planet from the other team. And then another example is Mars in Pisces and Jupiter in Taurus. So Mars is then ruled by Jupiter, but Jupiter is then ruled by a nocturnal planet in Taurus.
So the question is the extent to which that cancels out the benefits of being in haze.
yeah, that's a question. That's a good one.
So what does contention mean for a planet? Apparently, Alberoni says that it's contention. It means dispute, conflict, strife, or disharmony. There is nothing content or satisfying about a planet being in contention. The three-step process to finding out if a planet is in contention, and then is likened to a traveler going into hostile territory or being under the control of someone who wishes them harm simply because they themselves are quarreling with their own dispositor, Lord. We'll put something in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to say, because I have
But
never.
if you want to look it up yourself, it's in Joy Usher's A Tiny Universe's Companion, and it is explained on pages 71 through, gosh, it goes on and on. So till 79. So there's a full 9 pages on it.
But I have studied a fair amount of traditional astrology, and I have never heard anybody use that term. So I'm going to say it's probably not very commonly used, although obviously, you know, in Solar Fire, somebody's grabbed a hold of it, or that was Astro Gold. You found it, right?
Sim, I'm super curious. How do you find, now that you're kind of tossing it around in your mind, if you've got Munakara planets, do you mind giving a testimonial if you
Well,
can feel it?
I have 3 planets in haze, and each of them are Munakara. So, which is kind of disappointing that Donna's never heard of it. I wish I never heard of it as well now.
We all know it now.
I can kind of just pretend that this column doesn't exist, I think.
What do you say about it, though, in terms of your own personal experience?
I mean, it's really hard to say, honestly,
Yeah,
because
okay.
we're talking about. I have a son which is very strong. All of a sudden now I learn that it's in Munakara. I couldn't say. I don't know what interpretive value I could put on that.
Well, Joy Usher will help you out with 9 pages of information.
Okay, great. Thanks.
It sounds like you have that book.
I don't have it,
Oh,
fortunately.
you don't? Well, we'll put something together.
Thanks.
Well, Sam, I don't know you, and I don't know. I'm still wrapping my head around this term, but you know, often our greatest strengths come from our greatest challenges. So that probably just makes you stronger in all of those areas eventually as you overcome this stuff, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Thanks.
Yeah.